Welcome to The Chat. This is a podcast from the team at Glasgow City Mission, the first and the granddaddy of the global city mission movement. I'm Charles Maasz, proud to be CEO at this time. This series is intended as a resource and a point of connection for anybody interested in the work that goes on at Glasgow City Mission. I want to speak to people whose passion, vocation, career, faith journey or life aligns with an aspect of the work and the rhythm of what we do. Many will have a faith perspective, some will not. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Please check out our website, our social media platforms. Click like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and add us to your favorites. Feedback is welcome, but please keep it clean, keep it civil. Thank you. We've got Ricky McAddock with us today, which is amazing because Ricky's like a dynamo. He's the sort of guy that's high output and makes everybody else feel ordinary. So I'm glad he's not in the same room as me, which is superb. Don't need to feel inadequate at my age. So welcome, Ricky. Good to have you on here. And so Ricky is the founder or co-founder, is that right? Co-founder, isn't it, of Street Connect, along with his wife, Julie. And has got an amazing story to tell, has lots of experience, lots of compatibility between Street Connect and the Glasgow City Mission and the work that they do. And just a sort of an inspirational, brilliant operator that's close by, a brother, and been a great friend in terms of efforts, organization, reflection, and all the rest of it. So welcome, Ricky. Good to have you. And now I've introduced you slightly, if you could just tell us a bit more about you and the organization, Street Connect.
Thanks, Charles. It's good to be here, and it is great to be working closely with Glasgow City Mission. We're very aligned in what we're trying to achieve and how we achieve what it is we're looking to do. So great to be with you this morning. And yeah, Street Connect has now been going for 7 years. Began as a outreach for Glasgow City Church on Cathedral Street in Glasgow City Centre, became its own charity the following year as Street Connect. So it's been running as an independent charity for 6.5 years. We've grown quite a bit over that time, and a large part of what we do now is we still do a lot of service delivery on our own, but we also work in partnership with churches. We've worked with 8 different churches to date, currently have 6 partnerships on the go, and we're doing a lot of development work around how we can replicate our model around the UK, different aspects of our work, whether that be about making connections with people through street outreach and drop-in cafes, community-based cafes, or whether that be about moving people beyond the relationship building stage and into a place of building transformation into their lives through key work, one-to-one support, whether community-based recovery or preparing people for residential rehab. And we also do aftercare support, and a large part of that is centred around our move-on accommodation. We have 2 two-bedroom properties and are just in the process of purchasing a 1-bedroom. So we'll have our first woman in that over the next few weeks, which will be great. Hopefully the first of many. So we see it as like an end-to-end, but we don't believe that our model is the only way, or that people have to process right through our work. We are a big believer in partnership and collaboration with the likes of Bethany Christian Trust, Teen Challenge, Glasgow City Mission, and a number of other non-Christian organisations and agencies, because as long as we can be aligned in what we're trying to achieve, we can't do it all. And we've had some fantastic support over the years, and it's been vital in facilitating that transformation process in people's lives. So yeah,
transformation. Yeah, that's a lot going on. So I mean, in a way, hearing that, as incredible as it is, you could be framing the picture of a small sort of church-based endeavor, but the scale, you've not really given any indication there. But for anybody that listens, Street Connect's growth has been exponential by any ordinary standards. And it's really a credit to you all, but also a testament to the fact that God moves in people's lives. And you use the word restoration. And of course, for us both, restoration is key to current ministry, key to an emphasis, I suppose, in what we see as people's potential and bringing that out, seeing people that are in chaos and bringing them towards some form of newness of life. if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to touch on how restoration has become a central theme for you personally and for your wife personally, if you're happy to do that, because I think people will understand better your heart and the heart of the organization.
Yeah.
And what your vision is moving forward, indeed the vision that we share, I think. So how did you come into thinking about this restoration?
Yeah, the passion and drive for what we do, for me and my wife and many others in the organisation, comes from a place of lived experience. You know, I came to faith in 2007 from a background of no faith at all. You know, I had a Protestant mum and a Catholic dad. I thought faith was related around what team you supported. And as far as religion, and people only asked me which I was to find out if I supported Rangers or Celtic. But yeah, so faith for me really became a reality in 2007. And it was first through meeting someone who'd done a teen challenge program, and their life had been, you know, changed drastically. And I was drawn to something in that, and I went to Teen Challenge in 2007. That's where my faith journey began. It wasn't easy initially. There was a lot to unravel, a lot of baggage to work through, a little bit of relapse along the way, but been walking fully in victory for probably about 10, 11 years. And yeah, just thank God for what he's done. And Julie, about the same time frame, similar story. But yeah, it's through our relationship with Christ that's been that key to our transformation.
So you've been at the place of what you felt was would you say that you came from a place where things were out of control for you? Would you think that you and Julie would say that?
Yeah, yeah, that would be a little bit of an understatement.
Well, you're an understating person, so that's
yeah, very much so. Charles, my life was chaotic, unmanageable, and yeah, inwardly, I was probably a mess, more so inwardly than outwardly. Outwardly, my life was very much a mess with drug addiction and selling drugs and all the stuff that was associated in prison, and you know, all the stuff that came around that. Julie, the same. So yeah, it's brought complete order to my life, inwardly and outwardly.
it's amazing. So that really is transformation, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To go from being a wee blade around town, selling your stuff and doing your naughties and spending some time in porridge, and then to become this kind of, like I said at the beginning, some sort of human dynamo, sort of ultra high output, visionary, driving leader of an organization that has been growing is a truly incredible testimony for you both. You're like one of these superhero couples. You've probably got cloaks and stuff, haven't you?
No.
But it's inspirational. I think people need to know, don't they? Because people need a template. Really, sometimes they need an example, and maybe you two are both brilliant examples of transformation.
Yeah.
And transformation takes place not because you are both awesome, which you undoubtedly are, but because there are other people who pour into us, who poured into me, who poured into you. So we bring ourselves to this idea that people can be transformed because of community.
Yeah.
And the central role of no man is an island, I suppose. So that develops our thinking, I think, when we're in shared groups, because, you know, you and I are both part of a thing called the Everyone Home Collective in Scotland right now, to eradicate street homelessness in Scotland, which would be an incredible thing, an aspiration and a vision which we're keen both to be part of. But of course, that's a largely secular thing, and they've bought very much into, nationwide, very nobly housing first as a model, and which the Glasgow City Mission bought into as well very early on. But you and I both hold out that actually, in terms of taking people that have just known mentalness, have just been absolutely like mad with it for since they were little, it takes more than just giving them a flat, doesn't it, to steer somebody towards anything close to discipleship or meeting their potential. So where do you sit with where the models of community dwelling might fit with the formation of people into the fullness of who they might be?
To set a bit of context there, Charles, when I said I went to Teen Challenge as well, I mean, I said I was a mess outwardly. The drugs were kind of ravaging me, but inwardly, I had depression, anxiety, full of insecurities, fears, all these things that God started to outwork and unwind in that place of community. And there is something about community. The Christian faith centres out around community when you think of the early church. But I think of culture today, Western culture anyway, and how individualistic we are. And I'll hold my hand up before I go any further. I am very individualistic.
Same.
So community today is a major challenge for me.
Yeah.
But I know the benefit, and God, as we speak, God is doing a real work in me about community. Me and my wife moved to the community of Govan to be part of the community. We felt God was calling us to be a light in an area of darkness and just to love people round about us. And so community, yes, I fully 100% believe in community. I do believe in housing first. I do think it can work, but you wrap the support around people. But we also know in the rapid rehousing framework is that it speaks of, that won't work for everyone. And there is a space for community-based supported accommodation, but which is, say, smaller, moving away from the likes of your massive hostel type support, which can be a cesspit for all sorts of stuff going on, to a smaller, I didn't give a number, but I take that number somewhere between maybe 6 and 12 people, and coming into that environment and having support there kind of on tap, really, and just of living together. And that's what it did from someone that was so individualistic to go in there. It was hard at first, but the Bible says that iron sharpens iron, and you find that you put yourself in amongst all these different people from different backgrounds, and you've got the staff, you've got the I think it was about 30 guys at some points, and you rub off against each other. But in there, God used that to break down so many things in me and form me, and unform and then reform.
Yeah. So the stripping away of what isn't in order to bring forth what is and should be. Yeah. So you go from being this sort of sole operator, independent, I don't need nobody kind of guy, to suddenly you're in this house full of, or whatever the context was with Teen Challenge, of other people with other histories. And there's that whole thing about feeding time and space and being on your own and not having enough time to yourself or whatever. So there's an adjustment there, isn't there?
Yes, 100%. It isn't easy. It was really hard, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because it did. I formed deep connections with people that I probably hadn't done since being a kid, really. Because I'd moved around so much. I was always on the go and always on the move, and that really helped to break down a lot of barriers in me and to shape me. And I think God expects us. The church is community, but in terms of people's recovery journeys and people from a background of chaos with multiple different issues, then I think there is something special about having people round about us, because we know one of the biggest problems in our society today is loneliness and isolation. amount of people that you put someone in their own flat, in a community, but as we know, community isn't the way it used to be. And you don't even know your neighbours half the time, so I think there's something about that. What that reduces is that loneliness and isolation, the impact that has on your mental health and your overall well-being. Yes, people are great against you, but I think in terms of forming and shaping us, it does something that, that the wraparound support and you're living on your own can't do. It's not saying you're going to be there forever, but which I wasn't. And I'm glad I'm not still, now I've got my own community, I've got my wife, my kids, and, those round about me. But as part of that shifting from the chaos into facilitating that whole process. Now, am I the finished article? Absolutely not. I've still got loads of stuff to work through, but I know that in community and with other people, the outworking of that, for me, it felt was fast-tracked compared to if I was out on my own and just getting support here and there. But in that kind of condensed atmosphere, it almost felt like God fast-tracked a lot of the healing that I needed.
I think that's an important point, which is that, when when people are placed, people from really chaotic backgrounds, and I'm not talking about here people that have had some sort of religious epiphany or anything either, just people that we deal with day to day in Glasgow. You put these people in a home and you treat them brilliant and you make the flat awesome and you do everything you need to do and you'd want to do because you'd want it done unto you. Indeed, that is what we do. But then you start to see that indeed the house, the internal house that is divided against itself cannot stand. And the truth of that becomes evident because if you've not gone through this period of, firstly, recognizing that you're broken, and then secondly, recognizing that you're not and you can't thrive as a solitary being, and then you don't learn to live alongside, rubbing the rough bits off you to make you smooth, other people, then you've put a troubled person in a flat who's troubled internally, who doesn't know how to coexist with neighbors, who then becomes a problem neighbor, who then blights a tenement block. The close becomes a difficult place to be. They get stressed. They don't know how to open their envelopes. They're not sure about how to cook. They've never probably, often not paid a bill. They're often self-neglecting or making bad decisions.
Yeah.
To put, even with wraparound care, that wraparound care has limitations in my view. And the best place to bring somebody from what is effectively, well, I don't mean it rudely, but is an infantile developmental position, because they've never been accountable. They've never had to put themselves or be exposed to critique. They'll do anything to avoid being found out as being in any way inadequate. There's a general lack of development that may have started very early in childhood. Those issues are hard fought through and hard won gains. If you make gains, it's best done, in my opinion, in a thing which I'd call deep community. Yeah. And the problem with culture, like you said already, in my view, is there's a lot of thin community around. There's a lot of superficial community around. There's a lot of Facebook groups to belong to. Often church will fall into this. But the depth of community, the one where everybody knew everybody round the way and you went to the same shops and you went to the same pub or I don't know what, but depth of community that the Bible speaks of in terms of the early church, which demonstrates a very deep belonging of brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
That's nowhere to be found. And really, a tragically broken human being really needs, I think, the communal wisdom of the community nurture, where they can be broken, find a confidence to be vulnerable, and the people round about can help reconstruct a person into being the person they were born to be. So I'm passionately on board with this idea.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of the same numbers as you as well, I pretty much solidly fixed. I mean, I'm thinking forward here. We've got this vision that there should be some form of community house for people that have either come through a rehab system, residential rehab, but they're not quite ready, or they come through prison and they've had transformational experiences in prison, but they're not quite ready. They're not yet fully equipped. We're thinking that probably an 18 to 24 month program in a community house might be just the ticket, with a developed plan for helping them to move on into independent living, still connected to a community, but the aim is to bring them out of institutionalized and juvenile ways of thinking into fully independent, thriving, contributing people. Does that ring true with what you're aiming at?
Yes, absolutely. That sounds fantastic. Something we were considering as well was, you mentioned coming out of rehab, so that was an area that we seen a gap in when we started early on, and we've got, as I mentioned, we've got some flats, and when people coming out of residential rehab, out of like a community-based setting, and often the struggle in that, because it isn't always easy, it is difficult because you are getting rubbed and challenged, and it can be quite a challenging environment, particularly when for people that have been so individualistic, and used to just doing things their way on their planning and timing, etc. But when people come out, so that's what the relapse rate is quite high, and people can kind of struggle reintegrating back into community, so wider community. So we had these flats, but even in the flats, we've often found that guys struggle. We've got a high success rate of people that go on and do well, but those that haven't, they've struggled because they've felt lonely and isolated, what we were just saying earlier, and struggled coming out of that. Even if there's two in a flat, the other person's away doing whatever they're doing, and they've came from that community setting and came out and struggled, and some have relapsed and aren't in a good place as we speak. So but for earlier in the stage is when we're connecting with people on the streets, and we felt there was a gap there around that supported community for people, because a lot of people can't go to residential rehab because of medication they're on or their particular situation in their lives. So if there was some sort of community-based house, as you're saying, that people can go to as a step towards progressing in their life, whether they wanted to go to rehab or whether they wanted to go into their own flat after this, or whatever that looked like, just providing that support in community, I think, is critical to people's journey.
Okay, so I hear two different models here. So I'm hearing from you a community-based abstinence and rehabilitation project in community. Is that one side of things? So for the people for whom going away for, say, 18 months is not practical and frankly impossible or not attractive, there are still ways perhaps in which they can be restored in community without going to residential rehab. That would be one, I guess. I'm seeing that as a distinct thing, as opposed to what I was talking about, which is taking people that have come through a long part of the process towards getting clean and rehabilitation, but they're not quite ready for grown-up life, if you like. And I would think they're two different things. Do you see that you could have the two coexist in one system?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, because people are individuals, and different people need different lengths of time as part of that journey. So some will need longer and need more time in community. Others, will feel ready to move on into their own place, into work and stuff at an earlier stage. So yes, I think they would absolutely could coexist well together. Could actually be really complementing amongst residential rehab, and having these three options available, I think would be great. And you could see people actually progressing through each, if that was the direction they chose for themselves.
Break those three down for me then. So you and the three are, go give me the 1, 2, 3.
So yeah, it would be something when people are at their most chaotic in wider society, like whether that's on the streets or whether that's in their own place but are really struggling and can't get down on levels of methadone or are on all other types of medication, but would feel they need additional support in community, would maybe be like that first stage house, like a supported accommodation unit, where you have maybe 6, as I mentioned, 6 to 12 people in, and you have 24-hour support. So they come and go from the house, but they've got a level of support, you know, and part of that, one person might want to then decide, I want to go to residential rehab, but I need this community-based support to help me get there because I can't do it out on my own.
Yeah.
So that could be one choice, or that someone else could just say, I just need enough help to get me stable before if someone's on the streets to get into my own house, that would be fine. And the same could be said, I just need some community space before going back to my own house. I just need a bit of support. I'm really struggling on my own.
Yeah.
And then you might have a house and go back to that, you know. Or they could then, if they progress to rehab, could do that. And depending, they could even bypass stage 2 residential rehab and come from that first stage directly into the third stage that you're talking around, if they're stable enough for that stage.
Yeah, each their own, on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Could you imagine a community residential model where you had people that were at the first stages, say still mad with their addiction and usage, but then you've got these people that are at a kind of crucial, vulnerable stage who've maybe come through residential rehab but are still working it out? Could they happily live in a residential unit with the people that are still actively using? And how do you think is that risky? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that might prove quite difficult.
Because I'm thinking of supported accommodation as it stands, the models that are out there available, let's say Aspire, right? Wonderful organization, do great work. And we know people that are resident with them. But I know a man who's really close to us, who has had a relapse. He's lost his flat, so he's now staying with Aspire, thank heavens. But that supported accommodation, he now shares with people who are absolutely mad and all about it, as well as those that are trying to work it out. And it's a risky place for him to be, in my opinion. But am I being a bit too protective, or do you agree?
No, I would agree.
Right.
I would agree that's going to be difficult for someone to come into who's at a different stage in their journey and could benefit from a different type of support. That's the beauty of having different options available. You know, because that would be quite challenging, obviously. If that was the case, then, you know, I think the staff team would have to be very aware of trying to protect that guy and what he does with his time, and probably you wouldn't want that being a long-term stay, because it'd be more likely that he's going to fall into the ways of the others than him to pull the others out. So it'd be it would be high risk.
Yeah, good. Well, I agree. I didn't, because I wasn't sure at the beginning there whether or not one of the 3 models was that you had the 3 combined or if they were distinct. Because if you're going to do 3, because I can imagine, like, so now we've started this, I can imagine the same. Now I've got 6, at least, maybe 8 houses, because you'd also want one for women, right? Would you have a blended? Would you have a blended unit in terms of genders, or would you keep them?
I think ideally it would be separate.
Yeah, agreed. So potentially then you've got 6 houses, right? Okay. And then I imagine that it might be helpful to have some sort of rural respite house for training, contemplation, away days for team building and stuff like that, like a retreat center for people that needed just to get out of the town. So I'm knocking that on there as well. So I'm putting 7 in. That's 7 houses. So where do you begin then? You've got to pick one, I guess, because they're big chunky projects, right? You're talking, let's imagine, right, a house of 12 self-contained studio apartments with some common facilities, classroom, dining area, commercial kitchen, staff support office and operations room, car parking, some outdoor space. You're talking a big piece of work.
Yeah.
So which one do you pick first?
Well, for for me, because speaking of a part of the vision of Street Connect was that supported accommodation unit at the earlier stage. So we did a lot of research. We spoke to a number of organisations like Bethany, who run like hostels, and Lighthouse, who run supported accommodation unit down in Rotherham, and other organisations as to how they man that, what the costs are, etc. So for me, that would have been what we were looking at, although we've done move on accommodation first for guys coming out of rehab. But so we would look at that. But we had a time of discernment at the end of last year where myself and others on the leadership team and members of the board came together just to seek God's wisdom, and just felt that it was something we would do, but just not yet, because as you mentioned earlier, we've grown so much over the years that we had to consolidate and strengthen our foundations so that we were in a good position. If to run a project like that, as you know, would cost a lot and would take a lot of manpower and energy and effort. So we just felt that it wasn't the right time yet for us, but sometime over the next few years that would be. So for me, that's where we would start, I think. But
at the early side, at the early end, we're still using
one, stage one, what we spoke about. But but hearing you, I'm sounding you would be stage 3. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think so, because like you, we're connected to the people that are. We're well connected to the community of people in the city that are at stage 1 or before, probably mostly before stage 1, because I would say stage 1 is at a point where you recognize that you need some assistance.
Yeah,
that's a big step. So we're well used to working with. That's probably the main cohort of people we work with, right? As will you. And then we work one-on-one with lots of people, and some of them, like as you are a key referrer to residential rehab, as are we, and we're closely connected, I think, to most of the residential rehabs in Scotland, as you will be. And I really see a lot of people fall away through that process. I understand that, that's true. And there'll be flaws in each process, no matter where they go, whether it's Teen Challenge, The Haven, Carpenter's Arms, whatever it is, Sunny Brae. But it's often when people come out the other end of a intense community model, then they go, right, I'm full of vim and vigor. I've got my bottle back. I'm feeling great. I'm a brand new creation in Jesus. I know a few learned verses. I'll just shout them really loudly and everything will be all right. You know what I mean? All right. And then they get out and it's like, actually, housing's not easy. It's like what they find actually, and this is a tragedy, is that they're just a little bit too clean and a little bit too sorted to qualify for a lot of the really crisis intervention stuff that they could really still do with, because actually inside there's still a mess. They're still frightened, So there's there I think they're vulnerable, because it's like, hold on a minute, everybody said that I'd be great, everything would be great, I've got faith, I've got new life, but actually if I was mad with it still on the gear, I'd probably find that there would be more agencies willing to help me. Where's my deposit for a flat coming from? Who's going to help me find it? How am I going to furnish it? So I really, yes, you're right, 3 for me, because I see that is a very risky place where people are not yet strong enough to fly by themselves. They've left the nest but they're not flying. That's a problem.
Yeah, I would agree, because I think people come and think I'm off the drugs, I've been clean for this period of time, but there's still so much to work through, and a lot of the stuff that they won't really encounter in that kind of community bubble as such that rehab can be at times is when they come out and they face the day-to-day realities of life in wider society. Becomes a challenge, and they realise, wait, as you say, I've not worked on developing the skills to improve how I manage my house, how I use my time when I've got that on my own, and you know, how I'm engaging, and you know, what am I looking to do, how am I spending my time, etc. So there's a lot to work through there, isn't there?
Yeah, massive amount. Do you think there's an issue with falling in love with the ordinary? You know, a lot of people that are seeking the high, or they're escaping the pain, they pursue the highs, right? Or you pursue the block it all out, just feel nothing but just exquisite rapture, like abandonment to the substance. And you're encouraging someone to get clean because, you know, they know deep down that it would be better. But the trials of life in its ordinariness just lack the high.
Yeah.
And the lows are still there. There are still issues to contend with.
Yeah.
How do we encourage people to fall in love with the ordinary, the sunrise, the bird in the hedge, the frost on the windscreen, the children not wanting to go to school, you know, the going down the supermarket for your week's messages and filling your cupboards and taking delight in those things?
Yeah.
Is that a thing you think that is a challenge for people?
Yeah, definitely. As you say, you know, you're so used to living in a certain way, developing certain coping mechanisms, the things we value and appreciate in life have to completely shift. So we have to unlearn a lot of these and relearn, as you're saying, a lot of new ways of perceiving life and appreciating life. So yes, I would agree 100%. I mean, when I first went in the Teen Challenge, I went in thinking that drugs was the problem. If I can just get off the Valium and heroin, and then I'll leave and I'll relocate. My plan was I'll go and I'll stay. I'll go for 3 months. I don't need the full thing. Get off the drugs, and then I'll move to Swansea. That was the nearest place, and I knew a fresh start there. I'll be off. That'll be what I need. But the minute I'd stopped taking it, I remember looking in the mirror at myself and saying, I was a 28-year-old man. I don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
And I quickly started to realize, wait a minute, the drugs isn't actually the problem. I've got so much stuff internally that kind of the drugs kind of buried. And it was working through all this. And you're right, coming out and learning to, you know, appreciate just, you know, like picking up hobbies, you know, that you just chased after the drugs and things so much, you know, like playing the guitar for me was one, or music, fitness, exercise, you know, going out with friends and just going for things like coffee. I used to remember thinking, when I used to look at coffee shops, why do people waste £3 on a coffee? I could be spending that on this. But they'll be looking at me and thinking, why would you waste all your money on drugs and not enjoy the finer things of life? So you're right. You have to learn to appreciate the ordinary things of life. And yeah, you know, things like that I just didn't appreciate, like you mentioned, sunsets and, you know, the seasons of the year, you know, and how you can relate them to seasons of life and challenges we go. And just, I think appreciation of nature, of family, and things that you can take for granted, and or you maybe just don't appreciate in the ways that that you come to learn.
Yeah, because to come away from substance or whatever your thing is, you know, it could be your workaholism, and it could be retail, or it could be crack cocaine, but whatever it is, your method of escapism, to come away from that, but is not enough if you're if the way in which you are viewing your life, your value, your worth, and the world around you doesn't change too.
Yeah.
That is difficult to do outside of a community.
Yeah.
Unless you're a particularly inspired, ultra independent, introspective genius with a deep grasp of poetry and philosophy, you're going to struggle to do that by yourself. It's much better to do that around people that can help you. But also, not only us looking outward to the world and how we perceive the world needs to change, but our ability to accurately see ourselves
Yes.
is deeply impaired when you've just been the most selfish little git forever.
Yeah.
Putting yourself and your needs as paramount, chasing the 10 bag or whatever you've done all every day. You know, you put yourself first all that time. You're blind to yourself, actually.
Yeah.
And actually you need the people around you are reflectors of you back to yourself. And it's there in community that you would learn to see that actually what I hate that thing in Ricky that is the bit I don't like about me.
Yeah.
I see that speck in his eye because of that log in mine. You wouldn't make that connection, but for community.
No, you're right. And, you know, in community, whether, you know, and you're right, well, before that, you're right, self-awareness and is key to our growth and development, and understanding how we tick and why we do the things we do, and learning to change some of these, learning to accept some of them, but learning to change some of the negative aspects of that, and finding out things like, are we introverted, are we extroverted, you know, what is a personality type? And I think for me, I had to learn that not everybody is like me, and start to learn how different people think and operate, and in that community setting, you really get to see that. And that'd be the beauty of the stage 3, is it takes people's development onto another stage and level. And you're right, I agree, by getting to know ourselves and raising our other awareness and how we relate to others and ourselves and God, obviously, you know. And yeah, I just think that's so key to helping us. And then learning in the community setting, whether we're introverted or extroverted, you can still struggle massively, particularly when you've got other people, a different way of thinking and acting, and challenges that brings. But you can also develop some real deep connections in that setting. And as we mentioned earlier, you know, part of the shaping and forming process in us that you just don't get independently, that you do get in that community setting.
So if we see in the New Testament a model of church, or various models of churches, just to keep this, as anybody listening who's not from one tradition doesn't get offended, there are various models we can find in Scripture, and I'm sure they're all brilliant and wonderful. But do you think that if the church, because we operate what used to be called, I don't know if it still is called, a parachurch organization, that is, that we seek to serve the church, but we are non-denominational. So the church is outsourced to people like you and us, the work of dealing with the really difficult cases, right? Do you think that if the church today modeled something more of what we see, say, in the latter part of the New Testament, that actually all of the work of community housing that we're talking about would just be taken care of without having to call it a special thing? It'd just be a case of you come in, and as long as you surrender to the process, you'll be shaped into a new human being.
Yeah, I do. And, you know, as part of, for me, I think, there is a lack of community sense in some. I know some churches that do that really well. Some churches that we've partnered with that do community very well. And, you know, they literally do eat together, they spend fellowship together a lot, and you know, have people in and out their houses, and really have quite an open door policy. And, you know, it's not just church on a Sunday, it's actually much more. I've actually seen some of that in my own church in lockdown. It's a city centre based church, so it did lack that community, but there's been more of a community. You know, they've been praying. I've not been there as regularly as others, but they've been praying every day together since lockdown started, and it's continued on. And seeing real relationships formed in that weren't there before, and getting to know people on like a deeper level. And I didn't mention, but when I came out of Teen Challenge, that it was being part of a church community was actually key. I was part of a life group where we met during the week, and there was, because in that community-based setting of residential rehab, where everyone had similarities to my background, and I could relate to them well because we had relatable connections. But when I came out of that and I was in that, it was very much a middle class church I was in. So, people were from quite a different background than me. And in this house group, there was one guy that I thought was like really geeky. And I remember first thinking, how am I ever going to be able to connect with this guy? But God really used that relationship, and he became my best friend. We really hit it off. We used to have a right laugh together, and God really used that to break down barriers in me across like sort of social structures and class, whereas I was much more a working class background. And and I found that, wait a minute, we had so many connecting points. So beyond just people that were like me, to move to people that were quite different, I found is often a barrier that often people that we still support struggle to get over.
Yeah.
Particularly going into a church community where people are, there's a lot more middle class and very different than what they are like. But I think that is good. Cross-cultural, from different ethnicities, from different social structures, class. And that, for me, that's the beauty of the church community, is that you've got people in there and of a completely different walks of life, but come to get under the uniting factor of faith in Christ. And I think to be intentional in that, I often say that to people that we still support, is that say, oh, but people don't come and speak to me as much. I say, well, they maybe struggle crossing that barrier as much as you do. So why don't you be the one to engage? I said, whoever you speak to, you can find a connecting point. Well, it can be football, it doesn't have to necessarily be God, but there'll be something that you can connect on and build it from there. Yeah. He says, and the more time you spend, you'll find you've got more in common than you actually realise, and we can connect and build relationships. So I think there's something about people from different walks of life as well, I think, that really helps to enhance that development process too.
Yeah. Do you think that ability to connect, so this is probably spinning off a little bit into a different tangent, but that's all right. It's our talkie, so we can do what we want. It just makes me think of the appetite that, let's say middle class church that we just described. They absolutely have got a kind of an almost pornographic fascination with a good drug but rehabilitated testimony. It's like, oh, love a great testimony. Or did you hear Ricky's testimony? It was wonderful. But when you come through rehab, not even rehab, but any form of renewal, it's not to deny who and what you were, but a lot of people, through the demand for their testimony, understandably get a little bit intoxicated by a little bit of celebrity that comes with that. And everything about their newness of life is about them saying, oh, but I was you should have, no one would have ever thought I would have been a Christian, it's that kind of glorying in, oh, I was really bad and now I'm saved, hallelujah. And I get why people love it, but I think for the people that are being asked to deliver their testimony regularly, especially when they're not mature in the faith, their identity is formed in the telling of that story. It's almost incumbent upon them to retain some of their street credentials rather than actually become the people that maybe secretly they wanted to be a geek. Maybe they envied the bookish kid, but they couldn't afford to, so they had to take a different journey. But now in second part of your life, you can be as geeky as you want and enjoy it and think, actually, do you know what? This is who God made me to be.
Yeah.
That was the inner battle all along. And now I've been given liberty to be fully who God made me to be. And that is, I'm going to geek out on this stuff.
Yes, 100%. Julie, my wife, often jokes to me about that. She said, sometimes the inner Ned comes out in me. And then other times the inner geek. She said you're a real mix. Sometimes you're just a major geek, and then other times you're a major Ned. So I'm still out working a lot of that. But yes, I think there is that danger. But it's about finding who you are, who God's made you to be, and being okay with that. Because you're right. When I first entered into recovery and into relationship with Christ as well, it's kind of happened simultaneously for me, is I was always felt I had to put on this persona. So therefore, I was never really fully comfortable in who I was. And the big healing came for me. I mentioned relapse. I liked Teen Challenge. I joke often, I like Teen Challenge that much I went back for a second shot. But that wasn't the case. I majorly resisted, because I didn't want to go back. But it was the real healing came is when I came to a place where I could fully accept myself for who I was, and not trying to be someone else, but just being me. And that was critical in that journey, and that I can just be me. I don't have to try and be this person that that the world or my subculture said or looked up to. I don't have to put that on. I just be me. And you know what I found? Actually, people liked me better for when I was being me than when I was trying to be this person that I felt others wanted me to be. So it was all kind of messed up. And by being me, being happy in being me, and pursuing the things that I felt God had for me, was life-changing. And engaging in the different circles and building up, I look how diverse my friends and networks and connections are, and I love it. And in the church I'm part of just now, we have an international Sunday once a month, and sometimes it's a church of about 150 people, and sometimes there's 40 nations represented. Wow. And that's quite diverse. That's diverse. And if that's not equality and diversity, I don't know what is. We're of all backgrounds as well, even in amongst that. You've got people who are still actively in addiction. You've got people, bankers, you've got businessmen, you've got people in ministry. You've got just such a diverse group of people and of diverse nations, all in one building, coming together on a Sunday. And I just think that's great.
Well, it's amazing. And you just made me think of another illustration to bring this together, which is that for a lot of people that are spiraling out of control, whose lives just don't gel, either for them or the world around them, is that there is a conflict between the God-made person at the center that's getting shouted out or squashed by the perceived need to put on a persona around, which doesn't fit the inner person. And if you can strip off the fake persona and allow the inner person to come through, and that the outside then starts to reflect the inside, you have an authentic individual that the world can relate to, they can relate to themselves, and it all starts to work. And that seems to be but in defense of the people that have grown into the wrong persona, they've done so because of trauma, to cope, for mechanisms of survival, to survive mean streets, to deal with abusive families, to deal with early trauma. I understand. But when you see someone who's spiraling out of control, for me, it's a symptom often of a dislocation between who God made them to be and who they've tried to make the ego fronts fit. And it's simply falling apart. The facade is falling apart.
And the inner conflict that comes with that is, and people start to sometimes hate themselves or feel unworthy, and
or hate the world,
feel fake or hate. So there's so many ways, negative impact that can result from that. But there's something special about when we can learn to accept who we are and just be who we are and play the part that God intends for us to play.
Yeah, because it could be that, it can be that community. So community, we're going back to community. Community is the place where that can happen.
Yeah.
Where you can learn when community is working well, where you're encouraged to have the confidence to let all of the superficial stuff slide away and allow the person within to come forth. It takes a lot of courage to do that, especially if you've lived for 27 years putting up a front to the point where you don't know it's a front. To you, it's you. But it ain't. It's a myth. Self-generated myth for survival's sake.
Yeah.
You need community to help you do that. You do.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, I think we're going to wrap it up for today, but I think and feel that we'll do this again. I'm hoping if I manage to get this out as a podcast or whatever it is, that someone will hear it one day and be encouraged. That would be good. I'm not very technical, but Stuart, who does all the technical stuff, hopefully will be able to include a link to Street Connect website so that anybody interested can click on that and see what you do. One of the interesting things to me about Street Connect is when you describe what you do and how you do it, you're very much connected to the origin of the Glasgow City Mission, the David Naismith model, where they didn't have buildings and they weren't, it wasn't like we have it now. Though I'm proud of what we have now, it wasn't like that. He raised up missioners who were from every denomination, and they would go out to the streets, to the homes, in the way that Street Connect does. And so there's a deep accord, there's a deep affinity that I feel for what you do, which chimes with a deep core of our origins as an organization. So I just say that as it's true. One, it's true. Two, it's remarkable. And three, it's a blessing. So there we are. Thanks for being with us, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie.